Hey everybody, welcome to Adobe Live and today's Adobe Spotlight. My name is Emily and I have the pleasure and honor of hosting Kieron Lewis all the way from the UK.
Hi, thanks for having me, Emily. How are you doing today?
I'm good and it sounds like my sound is playing, so I'm not sure what's happening with that.
The
Sorry, I'm gonna turn
beauties
that
of
off
live
for a
stream, right?
second.
It's just like the joys of live stream.
Yeah, you wanted the intro again, so it's all good. Okay, anyhow, we're back. Hi Kieron, how are you doing? I believe it's the evening time for you, so thank you for joining us.
Of course, yeah. I mean, it's the nature of the whole UK US beauty of it. But yeah, I'm glad to be here. I'm excited to have a nice conversation with you.
Awesome. So if you're joining, we're so excited that you're here on YouTube and on Behance. Definitely jump in the chat. Tell us where you're watching from and how you're doing today. This is going to be a live interview between the two of us, but it is also a Q&A. So if you have any questions or comments for Kieron, definitely drop them in and we will add them to the stream. So Kieron, you are a editorial designer, a print designer, and a lot of other things. Do you want to give us a little bit
Mhm.
of your background and how you got to where you are today?
Of course, yeah. So I'll just read straight from the LinkedIn profile.
Perfect.
Bad joke. So yeah, I'm a freelance graphic designer based in London, like you said. Predominantly, I work in editorial, so I make books for a living. That's kind of what I do. With other bits and bobs here and there. But yeah, I basically love to make books, and I've been able to make a freelance career out of it for the past 3 years or so. And alongside of that, I also do a bit of public speaking at schools and universities. And then on the final part, I'm also doing some hosting for Adobe Live, which is obviously how we connected too. So yeah, I've got a few things going on, but the thing that really keeps me afloat is the book design world.
That's incredible. Yeah. So today you're not no longer the host, you're now the guest,
I'm
which is
happy to do that. Yeah, cool. I'll sit back and just kind of relax. And I'm kidding. Yeah.
switching chairs. I love it. So yeah, could you tell us a little bit more about your roots in South London? So starting there and now becoming
Yes.
a prominent freelancer and a public speaker even.
Of course, yes. I'll jump into a little PDF. Hopefully, you can see a giant picture of my hand, but there's more to it, I'm sure. So yeah, I grew up in South London, Brixton. For anyone who doesn't know Brixton, if you don't know Brixton, it's very hustle bustle. There's a lot happening. Culturally, it's very, very diverse, and it's just a place where there's a lot of things happening. And I grew up there from the age of basically from very young until 15. So I grew up in South London, Brixton, which actually has uh, an inf an influence in basically the work I do now, because Brixton predominantly back when I was growing up was predominantly a black community area. It's very much changed now, but a lot of the work that I do is all about communities, about people, race, and design. So there's definitely a bit of influence from my upbringing into the work that I do now, which I'm sure we'll go into it. And then you can see my little numbers here strategically on screen. Number two, graduated from University, Winchester School of Art. That was, my goodness me, nearly 10 years ago, is it?
Wow.
Yeah, that was, it's mad how time kind of flies, right? Yeah, that sort of 10 years ago or so. And then into the third thumbnail, that's where I had very little hair. You can tell that's been a long time because now I have a bit more. I worked in advertising. So before even looking into the world of editorial and publications, I actually started off doing advertising. And that was kind of my space, which it wasn't really for me, and that's saying it very lightly. I think the real passion and energy comes from community projects. It comes from collaboration, comes from editorial, which is kind of nicely linked into number four, where parallel to the full-time work I was doing, I was also doing some voluntary work as well. So I did some voluntary work for a platform called TEDx Houston, which again we'll touch a bit more on. And then number five, you might recognize the logo, Adobe. So I do some Adobe Live hosting, which again, it feels fairly new, but it's been like 3 years and it's been like a nice relationship where I do a lot of hosting, get a chance to meet some awesome people. And then the final one, number six, is what I'm at today, which is basically freelancing and working on books for a living. So yeah.
That's incredible. I appreciate how you chronologically added these up for us. That was
That's
very
my brain,
nice. A
right? It's
good
just like my mind palace.
You got to track, yeah, the history of all of it. I love it.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're now mostly in editorial design. Was there like a clear path that brought you there? Like, what was it? I know you were in advertising, but what brought you
Hmm.
to editorial specifically?
Do you know what? I think it's the idea of tangible. I like
Mm.
physical things in hand. I think it's the idea of when I was at uni, I worked on a lot of side projects parallel to my uni career as well. And I guess there's an element of creating something on screen and then being able to go to print and then seeing that process and physically touching it, playing with print stock, typography. I just loved it. I just enjoyed it. And I still do now. I mean, the books that I make now depends on the clients, of course, but there's such an enjoyment that you get from experimenting with typography, color, imagery, shape. And then when you tip into print, it's, you know, you get to that ever realm of obviously playing with materials and stock. So it's, for me, it's quite fun. And that process kind of evolved over a period of time with the clients that I've worked with. So yeah, it's been a nice kind of journey thus far.
That's incredible. So, as a print and editorial designer, I'm assuming that
Mm.
you're using a lot of InDesign. Do you want to show us a
Yes.
little bit of either your process or even just talk about
Yeah.
how you're streamlining your workflow in that way?
Of course. See, strategically placed on screen. There we go. My process PDF.
Wow.
It's like I never knew this was coming. No, so usually when it comes to with my clients, it depends on, you know, the client and what they want, of course. But there's usually a sense of, you know, I get a chance to do some inspiration, visual mood boards. And what I'll do is I'll kind of walk you through just an example of how I would go about it. I kind of live my life by grids and contents pages, so I kind of like to get that in there as well. Maybe not necessary, but I like to do it. So yeah, I try to immerse myself with as much inspiration at that early stage of any project. Obviously, right now you can see on screen a few examples of different spreads. I do try and get some stuff like outside of the realm of the web as well. So I might visit, you know, a magazine shop, get some photographs, snap it on my phone, upload it to my PDF. But usually I get an example or I find inspiration of different editorial spreads, collate them together. And sometimes I might even annotate them on a PDF when I send to the client. And again, I mentioned obviously going out, you know, you're stepping away from the screen and going into, you know, the world. This is an example, for example, where I'm working on a publication now for the V&A, and it's based on music. I can't say too much because it's still early days, but the research I can of course show you. And there's something I thought was quite nice about the idea of, you know, different genres that you get when you walk into a music shop, how it's kind of collated and this dividers, which thought was, oh, okay, well, I can see there's dividers of how you would work when you go into a music shop and how you navigate through it. Why couldn't we apply that to maybe dividers of the book? So again,
Ooh.
that's kind of where, again, it's early stages because the book is still very much, we're in the infant stage, but I thought there was something in there that we could explore. So again, I show this in my working out, in my, you know, in my experiment stages. 'Cause I think there's something in there in terms of how we can navigate through the book. And again, I might annotate the PDF or just send to the client and then actually talk them through, you know, the stages and my ideas, because I think it's nice to get the client to get the PDF, digest it, but it's also nice to almost walk them through your rationale as to why you selected it. Not just because it looks pretty, which it can look pretty too. That's not a bad thing. And then going into covers again, experimenting, playing around with typography, which I'll show some examples of well, what I've done with that. But I like to kind of show examples of things that are actively in the world that's working really well. And this is a project, yeah, like I said, it's I'm kind of teasing you guys because I've mentioned the V&A and I can't show too much, but it's something which is what I'm working on right now. And again, there's a lot of experimentation to be had with it. So I'm super excited to see how this unravels. So yeah, I feel like I'm just waffling now, but hopefully that's making sense so far.
Chat. No, it's been perfect. I think, yeah, I'm like, wow,
Yeah,
I want to see more, but now it's a bummer that we can't go past there with this, or maybe you'll show us a little more. But
of
chat had
course,
a quick
decent.
question for you. Did you always
Yeah,
want to
hit
be a
me.
designer? And if not, what did you want to be when you were
Do
growing up?
you know what? It's just so random. I'm glad you asked that question. I actually wanted to be a TV presenter. I know how cheesy that sounds, which is weird because obviously Adobe Live,
I think
it's
you're
all
kind
kind
of
of linked
doing
up.
it.
It's like a weird 360, right? But like,
Yeah.
because I grew up watching a lot of like TV shows and kids TV shows and CBBC. If anyone's from the UK, you know about that stuff. And I just thought that used to be quite a cool job to have. Like you meet people, you get to travel, get to maybe watch cartoons. I don't know. So like I always stuck with me to do the idea of working as a presenter of some sort, or even in journalism. I loved English in school. English and art was like my two favorite things. So I like reading, I like writing. So yeah, that was kind of possibly the root of a career. And then obviously now I'm in graphic design. But then the hosting, it kind of feeds into it, right? So I feel like I've maybe ticked off a box of what I wanted to do. So yeah, that's kind of hopefully answers the question.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you're working with books, which also pulls in, English and the
Exactly.
reading and writing. So I think it's perfect.
It's all linked up. It's all linked up. I mean, just on the screen now, we can see as well with colors as well. So that's something that, again, it does range on each project, but usually I like to kind of give two examples of different options for color palettes. So option one, option two, and then I will work across that. And also, it's nice to see how different options of the palettes will basically cross over. So, for example, you can imagine the light green and the black would work quite nice in terms of a contrast, and then so forth with the other colors as well. So, yeah, that's kind of other processes. And then going into a bit more, it's not always glamorous and shiny and all InDesign. It's pen to paper, which is weird because I know this probably looks really neat and tidy, but it's my brain generally. I kind of have to. I can't. I scribble down, right, but I do try and keep it fairly neat. So like I live by highlighter pens, so you can see there's little like lime yellow everywhere. But I kind of have to have that just so I have an idea of like where do I want the most impact to happen on the page. So you might have a gradient potentially here where there's Danny, or maybe some gradient potentially on the letter K for a full bleed spread. So I try and do my workings out very quickly in Moleskine books and then jump into the InDesign realm. So yeah, so let me know if I'm going too fast, but yeah, that makes
No,
sense.
you're doing great. I was going to ask, do you ever show that to the client, or is that just for you as you're working?
Ooh. I think making me wonder if I should now. It's usually for my own, yeah, my own
Process.
mind palace. Yeah, I guess so, because it's like the visual mood board obviously that you saw before, I'll definitely show that and explain that. But at that early stage, um, it's usually just for myself. But that being said, there's been projects where say we've got an idea, we're really trying to refine it. Rather than spend, a long time on InDesign or Illustrator or Photoshop designing it out, I might do some rough scamps and then scan that in. So I've done that before where I'll do like a scamp and then maybe a slightly designed version on top of it. So they can get an idea of how it would look. And at least that way
Right.
we know we're on the right path before I start really going at it full tongue. So yeah, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Perfect.
Um, and again, on the screen you can see a few examples of book covers. So this, do you know who this is, Emily? I want to see if testing the US knowledge if anyone knows. He's fairly big in the UK.
I
No pressure if
don't,
you don't.
but I'm terrible with anybody famous, and I think I recognize someone and
Yeah.
then it's not them. So no, I don't. I'm sorry.
I want in the chat. I put that in the chat. Does anyone
Yeah,
know who this
chat. Who is
gentleman is?
it?
So this is a guy, yeah, Craig David, which is funny because growing up, I grew up in the 90s, right? And like he was a big deal. He's kind of had like a revive, I guess, in his career. But Penguin, this is a project for Penguin Books, and they reached out to basically design Craig David's book cover. And I remember getting this project, and I was like, that's mental because like I grew up listening to him a bit in school and like watching him on like Top of the Pops, if anyone knows that, same my age now. But yeah, so now I'm able to work on his first ever book cover. So I wanted to get this in the PDF today to just to get you an idea to show you and the stream, of course, how I kind of go about with design options. I mean, there's 7 options here, which seems like a lot, and it usually would be, but this project was a year project, so
Wow.
it seems. And I guess because it was during the was it yeah it was during the pandemic, so it was very tricky to try and pin down folks because obviously there's no photo shoots happening, people were locked indoors, so there was a lot of Zoom calls and a lot of being not being able to meet in person. So it was a very plus he's a busy guy as well, being a celebrity and all. So yeah, it was tricky to pin down, but I just pulled out a few cover examples of the stages, and then actually the very final one. I don't actually have it on screen. I thought I had it on there. It's on the website anyway, basically. But yeah, there was loads of few different options leading up to it. And then yeah, I'm kind of going into a bit more into cover design. So again, staying with Penguin, who I work with quite regularly, usually just for covers with Penguin. This was another celeb by the name of Lawrence Okolie, who's a championship boxer for Team GB. So again, it was his first ever book, so it was a chance to. I don't know. There's a bit of it's like a nice pressure of knowing that what you design is someone's first ever books. It's like regardless how many books they make for how many years to come, it's quite nice knowing that you had like a hand in that first ever book cover. So on the left is the final book, and then obviously on the right is a few options leading up to it. And yeah, it's a funny one because you could be designing and sometimes not your favorite one is the one that gets picked, and that's okay. It's just the nature of the beast. So yeah, that's been a bit of a process as a
That's
whole as well.
incredible. So you said you only do covers for Penguin, is that correct? So you're not doing any of the interior layout?
No, I mean, if anyone's from Penguin listening, then hint, hint. I mean, I like to do because usually it's funny because, for example, HarperCollins, who I work with also quite regularly, they and we'll get into a project in a minute. So they and also a few other publishers are more the inside. So like for me, the bread and butter and the thing that I wake up for in the mornings is doing the cover and the inside. There's something
The
about just
whole,
doing the
yeah.
cover. Yeah, the whole shebang is nice. It's like I don't know what it is. It's nice to do the cover, but then it's like to also have a hand in the content and design it, and it feels like it's a front, middle, and end. Like it's a real completion of a project. But also covers are nice as well. So that's not me dismissing any cover designs as well. It's fun to do, but I've got a soft spot for the insides too. So yeah.
I love it. Yeah. I feel like, and someone in the chat was saying that they're really excited for an InDesign stream because that's like a rarity. And so I feel like maybe that question's a little obvious, but actually I don't even know the inner
Nice.
workings of, who does the cover and who does the inside. But it sounds like, yeah, there's opportunity to do both or just one or the other.
Yeah, it depends really as well. Like I think when you with the publishing space, I kind of find it's probably an obvious one, but when you do a good job, for 2 or 3 briefs, it's the idea of having that nice working relationship. So you're able to do more and more, and they come back because they trust you and you know
Right.
about the process. So it feels, it's a nice kind of working relationship to have with these clients, and with what you can see on screen now is a perfect example of. Obviously, you mentioned about is only covers for clients, but Still Breathing, which funny enough, this is not actually the final cover, and I'll show you a bit more into it. But this was to do a publication, a 300-page hardback book, which sounds very short, but it was bloody hard, but in a good way though, I guess. So that was a 300-page book, and that was to do cover and inside. So that was the very first project I got as a freelancer.
Wow.
So I kind of jumped into the deep end, but yeah, just about made it in a swim. And yeah, so I made it work just about.
In the book world, is 300 short? Because when you said 300, to me, that feels quite long,
Has,
but in the
right?
book world, is that a little bit shorter?
Do you know what's nuts? It is long, and actually, when I even say 300 words, like who is this guy to say 300 words? 300 pages, not 300 words, 300 pages. But I think it's because I've done a few projects now of hardback sizes. Like anything, it's doing it in digestible chunks. So it's a 300 page book, which is obviously huge. But when you start to divvy up your InDesign file, it's manageable. And I know we'll get a bit more into some hardback books I've done before. And yeah, it feels now, if for example, the V&A, it's a lot of pages as well. um, and in my mindset, rather than think about the actual number, it's more how can we divvy this up and make it more digestible, not just for the reader, but also for my own, sanity. Because obviously I'm designing it, I need to make sure it's strategically kind of, genre chapter by chapter. And actually on screen, what you can see is because I kind of divvy up between Photoshop and InDesign. So I kind of play, and a bit of Illustrator to be fair. What you can see on screen is an example of with the cover options for the Still Breathing book, which for anyone's watching and thinking, how has he done it so color coded and it's so neat? I generally have to work for my mindset like in this way where it's like color coded and neat. Like I occasionally have a stick in a dump kind of moment where things are a bit more rough and layers are everywhere. But just for a publication of this size, it's you kind of need to have things in order. So you can see here examples of on the right hand side the layers where there was like 5 or 6 different options which I put forward. And actually I'm showing you stuff on screen, and here in hand now is actually the hardback book. So I'm not
Wow.
chatting all waffle. It's actually a real thing. It actually made. So again, it's nice to have something in hand. You can see the 100 slightly got red foiling, which you probably can't see on screen. Which is why the 100 was a big deal, which is what you saw on the screen, and the final thing having the 100 really big as well. So yeah, in terms of programs, it all kind of integrates and switches between.
I think this is the most organized Photoshop file I've seen in a long time. But maybe that lends
See my
to,
others, yeah.
yeah, lends to InDesign though. I feel like InDesign is very organizational, right? As you're going through chapters and things like that. So maybe it's cross-disciplinary for you.
You definitely have. And to be fair, what I'll definitely do is what I've got a part in the stream where I'll jump into an InDesign file of a
Yeah,
book which just came out, and I can show you. It's like it's all good me telling you this is what it looks like as the final thing, but actually
but show
what's
us.
like under the hood? Exactly. It's like, is this guy a real designer? Can he actually back his words? So I'll show I've done some actual stuff to it. But yeah, so yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now in terms of cover designs. And I've got some more stuff to show in terms of like crossover processes, but I don't want to keep rambling and talking too much. So I'll
Well,
let you lead with that.
I was going to ask if you wanted to show us next, if you wanted to jump into InDesign, or if you wanted to talk more about what like future trends you're thinking. So I'm thinking maybe we jump into actual files and show
Yeah,
if you'd like to,
let's do
unless you have
it.
something ready for us next.
No. So let's mix it up. Let's
Let's
go
do
straight
it.
into an InDesign file. So I'm gonna put this out there as a disclaimer, in classic fashion, and simply because I also have a bit of a new dad brain. Definitely not a new dad bod. That's gonna be a thumbnail. So yeah, basically I've got this is the InDesign file for publication I've kind of just finished ish. And I wanted to show the actual final file before we went to print. And this is the version just before. So if you see errors at the bottom, don't hate me for it because I usually make sure that's all out of the way. But this is the version just before. So we'll jump into. Well, firstly, I'll show you. Actually on
Please.
screen. Let me show you the final thing and then the InDesign. Nice and strategic. Where is it now?
So yeah, chat, if you're joining, we are doing a live Q&A with Kieron Lewis. So if you have questions, definitely drop them in the chat. People are very excited to be speaking with you and also just talking about editorial chat and in InDesign.
Yeah.
So it's
Bring
exciting.
it in. I love an editorial chat. Like, this is the
Yeah,
place to geek out with anything print editorial related. So you're in a good place for it, my friends.
perfect.
So yeah, this publication came out. Let's get this right. It came out in the UK December. So well, not February now, aren't we? So December, and it came out in the US in November. And it's a publication. Basically, it's by Chronicles Books with Charlie Palmer and Karina Brown, who are the authors of a publication called The Brownies Book. And this originally started off as a magazine back in the 1920s by W.E.B. Du Bois, who made a magazine for basically children of the sun, for preeminently young Black children, to basically empower them, to inspire them, because there wasn't really magazines out there for us. So that was the kind of preface as to why they made it. And then we fast forward to now. Both authors, Charlie and Karida, wants to make a book to basically revive the content and bring it to life to a more modern day audience. So that's basically what you see on screen. So my job was to design the book, the cover and the inside, which you can see here. It's still in its actual plastic. That's how much of a geek I am, where I have got copies when it's open, but I've also got an example of it nicely sealed. And what you can see on screen is a few of the spreads, which on website I've got more intricate, more sites. But what I want to show you is the InDesign. So let's jump into that, and you can get a feel for like how was it actually made. So yeah, don't hate me, my friends on the chat, for if you see any errors, because usually I'm very neat for it, that sort of stuff. It's just like, it hurts me to even see a red button in the bottom hand corner. So yeah, this is kind of where I'm at with the InDesign file. So first things first, grids. I kind of have to work within a grid because it's well, for sanity purposes, right? It's a publication of this size, this scope, and you can see here. Well, it's a bit more example actually, where yeah, it's a 2-column grid where you're working within, and it's just nicely to keep everything nice and neat. In certain cases, you might imagery kind of bleeding off to the edge. But also, what you might notice is that if you're thinking, why does my screen look a bit dusty? It's not, it's a texture actually on the page. So I'm a bit of a sucker when it comes to like textures. So I've got a whole folder. I have for fonts, for color swatches, but I also got a whole folder for like textures as well. So I thought, based on the fact that it's a publication that's been revived because of back in the 1920s, 30s, it'd be nice to kind of have that kind of old isn't the right word, a more authentic kind of feel to it, I guess. There we go. Play on words to it. So I wanted to add certain textures on certain pieces of the spreads. So you can see here, this is a poem, for example, from one of the original pieces that was scanned in. So again, on certain pages, you've got this kind of textured feel on there as well. So it kind of all sits within there too. And then you've got your main chapters where again, it's nicely textured. And there's not many colors because actually one thing you'll realize on the artwork is that there's so much color on the artwork that it felt kind of weird to have loads of colors because in a way it feels like someone's diluting the imagery. I mean, remember, this is a powerful publication in the sense where everyone featured is there to inspire and to help, the Black community, predominantly young children. So there's stories, there's poems, there's essays, and all of the assets is really beautiful, colorful, and bright colors. And it felt from a design perspective to keep things slightly more, not use the word dull, but just not as more toned down, I would say, in terms of the version, just so that way nothing's fighting against it, so that the artwork really speaks for itself. So you can see as we're going through the book, everything's nicely in the 2-column grids, working within this. Actually, what is that from? Let's double check that. I'm going to say it's Brandon. Bearing in mind, it feels like it's been a while. So Brandon Grotesque, I think it's Gotham. I'm a terrible
Ooh,
person. Gotham. I nearly got that right-ish. Gotham for the title, and then I know the body copy obviously is classic Baskerville. Can't go wrong with Baskerville. And again, you can see examples of how I've treated the imagery where obviously the center is here, the gutter, and there's some images where it cuts over into a 3/4 of the page. So it feels there's ways of how you would treat imagery against the type so that it feels like they're not fighting against one another. It feels more uniformed. And by the way, again, tell me if I'm rambling on. See, I get lost in my own InDesign world now if I keep on going too
chat is
much.
loving it. I do have one question
Yeah.
for you. As you're
Yeah,
choosing
hit
these
me.
layouts, is that something that you are choosing on your own and then you'll get feedback from that from the client? Or what does that balance look like between the client and your decision
Mm.
making when it comes to layout?
It, it 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 does differ because with Chronicles, I never actually worked with Chronicles before. So they reached out and it was the first time, and it's always a tricky one because unlike, for example, HarperCollins or Penguin, where I've worked with them before, I've got an existing relationship. So I can challenge, I can, put ideas, and I always do other clients, but I guess it's that early stages where how far is too far. So obviously I luckily, well, the team I had with Chronicles, they were awesome, to be fair, really, really nice. And I worked with a lovely person called Alison, who was part of the team as well. And I feel like I had a lot of creative freedom of actually designing a spread. So I actually, obviously, I'm not going to design 300 pages, boom, like that. In fact, this wasn't 300. This was actually 208, actually. So a bit less. But I would design a few spreads to get a feel for on the right track in terms of style. And then
Sure.
based on that, we would then say, okay, cool, that's the route we like here, and let's run with it. But because Chronicles are based in San Francisco, and obviously I'm based in the UK, a lot of Zoom calls. So we're having Zoom calls, me and Alison, and obviously time differences, which is why 8 p.m. for an Adobe Live is okay, because I'm so used to the time difference of US UK. But it was nice to kind of walk through the steps with Alison and to go through designs, and also not to be afraid of, use the word afraid, but like the idea of challenging, because I think that's an important part. And we'll probably talk into a bit short in terms of advice for people starting out in editorial, but being able to challenge the client is quite important, and to feel like if you want to say something that you feel from a design perspective would make it, more impactful, then that's okay to put that across, as long as it's in a respectful manner. So I had that fortune to do that with this book. And yeah, you can see again, everything's in a certain way. Also, in terms of like the real logistics of the spreads for anyone like InDesign like geeks out there, which is a cool thing. When it comes to my masters and doing how my page numbers and everything's set out, I kind of work out by doing a few. So if you go to your parent files here, I've got examples of how potentially the slugs and the page numbers will sit. So I had a few examples. One option there, option two, which is what I went up going for because it's a bit more nice and clean. I thought about the idea of even page numbers in the center, like where the finger is, or where the thumb is, when you turn the
Cool.
page. I know, mind-boggling, right? So yeah, I thought about that potentially as a route, and then yeah, again, different ways of how you would do it, and yeah, it felt right to go with this option, and again, obviously applying it for the actual publication. So yeah,
I mean, they're definitely small, like it looks like small changes when you show the options like that, but the impact on the book really would have huge implications and changes. So
massively.
yeah, yeah.
Massively.
No, this looks
And
great.
and also what's cool is like these as well. Like when I do, and this is something that I always call like an little Easter egg, because when I design publications for clients, it's not necessarily they ask me to do pull out quotes. And if I've got a publication, like for example, maybe with the V&A or definitely the Brownies and say even the Still Breathing book, when you've got a lot of text on a spread, it's my brain sometimes doesn't process that easily, because I struggle sometimes with that amount of text. So when I design something like that, I try to think about, if I was reading it, would I feel comfortable reading that much space of text? So a nice way to kind of break it up and make it more digestible is kind of introducing, pull quotes, which is basically just, sentences from the actual paragraphs, maybe perhaps really impactful parts of the sentence that you want people to really get across. And I always put this in there because I always think to myself, for those who just kind of want to get a gist of potentially that spread, rather than having to read everything, which I hope they do, of course. But if they don't really want to, at least they can read that particular paragraph or the quote, and then get a real feel for the actual spread. So yeah, I kind of throw that in there strategically in certain of pages that I do as well.
You're
And that goes
giving,
down really well with the client too. So yeah.
it sounds like you're giving the Spark Note the cheat version of it, which is really helpful. And for
Yeah.
like referring back, I think that is really major.
How dare you call me a chit? I'm kidding. Yeah, no,
No,
I know what
it's
you mean.
good.
I'm playing. I'm
Um,
playing.
we
Yeah.
had a question from chat about what is your favorite part about this project? Or
My
what was your
favorite
favorite
part.
thing even?
Okay, so the obvious one that comes to mind is when it is printed and done, because because of obviously logistics of being in the UK and US, I don't get a chance to do test runs or see a test proof.
Oh,
Because
wow.
obviously, so again, I'm designing something and then I press send, and it's like, oh my god, it's out to the world. I have no idea what it's going to look like until a copy gets delivered to me at my door. So there's that anticipation. It's almost like a kid at Christmas. Where you're like, I have no idea. It's going to look good. Is it going to look cool? Is the gold foiling going to come out well? So that was an enjoyment where I'll sit at home with my wife, and then we'll get like a package. And it's like, cool, I think this is it. And then you open it up, and it's nice to see it.
Wow.
So that was a real enjoyment part of it. And also I think as well, like working with a new team, because I never worked with Chronicles before, and hopefully we do some more stuff together. But it's nice to kind of work with a new team, because you don't know the dynamics of how that's going to pan out. And it's almost like, sounds like a weird analogy, but it's like going on a date for the very first time. You have no idea how it's going to end up, but it's that excitement, that adrenaline. So I get that even when I go into like a client call for the very first time. So yeah, that's kind of a long-winded answer, but hopefully it answers your question too in the chat.
It's great that you get to collaborate with internal teams like that and have a different play, and depending like which publication you're working with, that's really exciting. I feel like keeps it interesting and like inspires you, I'm sure.
Oh, sure, 100%. It's and as that's the key, it needs to keep you creatively afloat, and also challenge you as well, right? A book like that, every
Yeah.
single book that I do, regardless of how many pages it is, it's still a challenge. Like it's, yeah, I'd be lying to anyone in the chat if I said that it's an easy thing, but it's that element of just doing it in digestible chunks, like anything you do in life, I guess. It's just, rather than think of it's 300 pages, it's just, okay, it's 300 pages, but let's do the first 20 first and see how we pan out. And then it's a revolving thing from there. And by the way, on screen, you can actually see these are the two authors, Karina
Oh,
and Charlie, which again, it's nice because when I got a chance, I met them on camera after the book was out. We had a nice call. I never actually met them the whole entire process of the book, because obviously that's what happens when a designer, you don't really maybe see the author. I mean, I had a chance to have a Zoom call with them, and I was gonna go to the book launch that they had in oh my god, it was in is that Atlanta? Yeah, Atlanta, yes. And I was gonna get a chance to fly out there and to meet them personally and to see the book. But it was the same time I was doing Adobe Live in Munich, so the dates didn't pan out. But yeah, the opportunity was there. But it was nice to sort of see them, and also to have a conversation with them, and it's nice, yeah. And also I'm designing them with their picture in high res on my screen for so long. It's like, oh my god, these are real people. So yeah, it was nice to sort of put a face to like the names of the people that I worked with.
that's incredible. So, as you're doing feedback and as you're working with your clients, how do you navigate that? And I hear that you may have a publication to show us some of the edits or something.
I do, yes, I do. So yes, in terms of, hang on, I'm in the right place. I'm in the right part actually. Very nice. There we go. There we go. Nearly tripped up
Perfect.
there. So yeah, with I think I mentioned at the very beginning, that Photoshop file you saw, the massive 100, the still breathing. That book always have a special place because it was the first book I did as a freelancer. In terms of first hardback, so obviously soft spot for there. But also it was perhaps the most challenging because I've never done a hardback book before. So when I designed a few spreads, few layouts, the thing that I was always curious about is how do I do amends? How do I get feedback? And what was useful, and a lot of clients do it this way, and I personally find it super useful, is that when they do an annotated PDF. So what you
Mm.
can see on screen here is a few examples of screenshots of some of the spreads, which I don't know if you can see on screen now, but obviously we've got the book. I'll flick right through it without dropping the book. But yeah, there's different spreads happening in the book, and everything panned out really well. But obviously that's just the final thing. You don't actually see what goes on behind, behind the closed doors. So obviously on the screen now, what you can see is a few examples of how we would annotate, or the client, I should say, would give me amends, and I would basically action those. And does it say how many? Yeah, so you can see here in the right hand corner, there was 939 amends to go through every single one and tickets. So yeah, that was a lot. That was like having a solid Spotify playlist and just blitzing it as much as you could, and then obviously having to flag it and then go to bed and then continue the next day because no one's doing 939 amends. Well, maybe you are, but I definitely wasn't in the same day. But I wanted to show this because if anyone's kind of starting out or even working on a hardback book, it's nice to sort of see how folks like myself maybe get amends and how they kind of digest it and figure it through as well, because it's not a case of just back and forth emails, which people can, but that's just mental for your inbox, right? It's no one wants that. I definitely don't want that. So yeah, it's just a case of having amends and things nicely done. So yeah.
Does it take you a while? I mean, 900 is definitely a lot. Are a lot of those small changes, like add a period, capitalize this or something like that, or are a lot of these really heavy lifting?
Some of them were like it's do you know what it is? It's the ripple effect. Like I think for
Sure.
anyone who's a designer, and we all know, right? Usually with Editorial, other projects in general, one little movement or something, it doesn't necessarily mean that's it. Like if you're from a design background, if it's a design, for example, I don't know, I want to change an image from a landscape to a portrait. You tell an editorial designer that, they're like, Jesus Christ, okay, let's excuse myself, blasphemy there. But how do you go about, the ripple effects of how you now revive that spread? So there's always that element. So then in some cases we had to move things around and rejig it. That's a pretty good example here, actually, in the top left, where you got the arrows, you can clearly see, you know, looking at it now, actually, and I think, oh, is it really clear where your eyes would read onto? Are you going from left to right or up down? And it's things like that where you've got to take into consideration, it might look good, but logistically, or logically, does it actually read well? Does it make sense? And the way of how you would read a book, you've got to kind of factor those elements in as well. So yeah, to answer your question, There was a few like intense amends. And actually the biggest one, which I think we'll maybe go into now. Yeah, let's go into it now. The challenge that I think I had the most in terms of a project was this one, because it was during the pandemic, right? It was during COVID, so we couldn't do photo shoots. So you can imagine you've got
Mhm.
100 people, all from different disciplines, all from the UK, and everyone's sending different pictures at different times. Luckily for me, I had an amazing team, so I wasn't the gatekeeper of the images. Like, thank God for that, because it would be manic. But I had a great team, Ben Gonner and Rose Sandy. So I got given the folders that they obviously filtered through, went through. But what I wanted to do was that when I got all these different imagery coming at different times, was to create a system whereby some imagery would be super high res, super great. Some would require a bit of TLC, a bit of editing, a bit of photoshopping, and then some was just you just can't use it, right? It's because it's just, and I won't name out names because I'm not that kind of person, but it definitely, I mean, I say that, and I've actually got color code by their name, so you know who it is. Classic. But yeah, I went through each chapter basically, and I tried to find a way of thinking, how can I best tell the client, i.e. Rose and Ben Gonner, who I was working with, what imagery do we need to go back to the those features and say, oh, can we potentially get another high res? Bearing in mind it's going to go into print, right? So we got to make sure it's at a
Right.
certain quality. It's not going on a Tumblr blog. It's going to be in a nice hardback book. So let's make it work. So again, yeah, you can see doing all these elements, but then also you can see a nice example of how we would do high-res imagery. So then I use that as an example of what you would do. So someone's like the kids in the class that done like the best, really best score results. Like, this is what you would do if you could. So then that went down well.
These are the gold standard. That's incredible. So you
Yeah.
you took the time to organize all of these along with the
Yeah,
team,
yeah,
it
yeah.
sounds like, and be like, hey, this is good enough, this isn't, like, and you were taking lead on that.
Yeah, I remember when I said this to them, and they were like, they were taken back. Like, how did you have time to?
Yeah, that's
But I remember
impressive.
saying I had to do that because not just for them, but also for my sanity, because it's like it's helpful for them because they can see what they need to change or revert back to. But when it came to me and designing a spread, I'd know by color which one works and which one I need to edit. So I kind of thought, if I make the hard work now, it's going to pay off in the long term, and it did, because it made life a little bit easier knowing which imagery I can go through and which one I need to add a bit of love to at the end.
Communication is so important, especially when you're dealing with something this big and this like interlocking of this affects that and everything like downstream.
Totally,
Yeah.
totally.
So how do you integrate Illustrator then and other, I mean, you're using Adobe Acrobat here, but how do you integrate Photoshop and Illustrator into your InDesign like workflow?
So let's go back into, let's see some spreads. Oh, going a bit far off.
Chat is asking if there's a slide for worst quality photo sent, but I don't think we should go there.
I'm not gonna be that guy. No, no.
But
Oh,
was there?
that's hilarious. I mean, maybe. I mean, to be fair, but you have to bear in mind it was during the COVID. I'm gonna be
Of course.
the go between. It was during COVID times. People would maybe have a nice photo shoot, but people were limited with his resources.
Of
So
course.
I can't be too, horrible at them. But I love the savageness of that comment. But yeah, it definitely ranged. In terms of the integration, I'm trying to find examples really of where that would work, and I might even go a bit further into my spreads.
Absolutely.
Yeah, maybe this is a good example. So, I mean, I mentioned at the very start of the stream about the voluntary work that I did. And I did a lot of voluntary work for a platform called TEDx Houston, which I'll talk about shortly, who they are, what they do. But in that particular project and with that voluntary team, I had to kind of work in between InDesign and Illustrator. So what you can see on the bottom left, for example, is creating a graphic on Illustrator and then transferring it over in InDesign, and sometimes in Photoshop. And the thing I love about the integration is that you can make a simple edit, say for example in Photoshop, press save, and it updates it in InDesign. The beauty of links, right? So there is
Right.
that element of knowing that, yeah, of course you can work in the safe space of what you feel comfortable in, just Photoshop, just InDesign, just Illustrator. But then when you're starting to navigate in between all three or at least two and think, okay, how can I make them work? It makes life a little bit quicker and easier. And I had a chance to really play on different programs, in particular with this project, because TEDx Houston, like I said, what they do. So TEDx Houston was a platform which don't do anymore, but basically it would put a spotlight on the African continent. So we would fly out speakers, all from the African continent, doing amazing work in their community, and they would give a talk, bit TEDx for most people who maybe know what that is. And basically I was part of the team, an amazing team I might add, which I'll put towards the end. Where is it? There we go. An incredible team of us, all from literally different walks of life, different disciplines. It wasn't just like myself as the own designer. I had an amazing other designer by Tola. So we were the sole designers on the team, and then we had people ranging from all different walks of life, but we all came together to kind of work on a sort of passion voluntary project. And the reason why I wanted to highlight in particular Amina and Afidaba, which I was going to have this at towards the end, but I have classic here, I'm waffling on. I wanted to highlight Amina and Afidaba because they were the two creators and the two kind of leaders as they were of the team. And it's funny because I remember having an interview with them for the voluntary project, and I was super nervous. We had a chat in a bar, and I showed my portfolio. And then we fast forward to like 3, 4 years later, and it's literally like a family. I mean, we have a WhatsApp group now. We don't do TEDx users anymore, just because everyone, life kind of kicks in. But we still actively, talk in our groups. And everyone in that team is actively doing impressive things on the continent still, or at least for the community, which is why I absolutely love being a part of a team like that. So yeah, that was a very long-winded answer about in terms of integrations of programs, but I wanted to put that in here because it's nice when you're able to play around different programs and then also have the confidence to do it in a safe space, i.e. in a voluntary project like a TEDx. So I'm very grateful for TEDx Houston in terms of a side project that I used to work on, or voluntary, I should say, that I did.
That's incredible. It really showcased your design skill and your unique style, I think, really well. Was there anything else from, yeah, that you wanted to show? I know there was a lot that went into it.
Yeah, I mean, there was, so you can see, because this was a 3 year project, right? So this was like, I was doing this whilst in my full-time career, and a little
Wow.
Easter egg for you. This is actually my wife here, actually. And I feel like that was it second date? I mean, I'll find out later, but I tried to kind of impress her by bringing her along to the TEDx deck, because obviously my designs were on display, right? So, I mean, it works because we're married now and got a baby. But anyway, that's a whole different ball game. But yeah, it was nice because you get to see the community, integrating with your designs. You get to see people engaging with your work, and more importantly, the content of what the speakers were delivering was so powerful that, as a designer, you're able to translate that in visual format, right? So you would create, installation pieces where you can see in the bottom right corner. You would create almost like picture frames so people can actually engage with the photographs as well. And overall, it's just an amazing event, an amazing part of experience to work on. So there's a lot of skills that I learned doing that, which translated into what I'm doing now as a freelance designer.
That's incredible. If you want to talk more about this, wonderful. But are there any like particular moments that were really memorable or any creative challenges that you face that you want to talk about or give advice from?
Do you know what's funny? I definitely skipped it because the color coded of all the imagery for the still brief, that was probably the challenge I was going to put in. But to be fair, like how we're nicely in the spreads now you can see on screen, I think the challenge a project like this is it a challenge? I guess it maybe would be, is that once a book like this is done and you feel, I'm very grateful for it's been out, is I always find myself thinking a book like this, it needs to do more than just be printed and just put in the bookshelf. What can we do to really make sure the conversation still continues? And when this book was out and it got released, 2, 3 years, yeah, 3 years ago, because it was during when I went freelance, an exhibition happened in Brighton, which was amazing. So it was the first time to sort of see work from a book, but then into an actual physical space. So you see people from the different communities. Again, because of the book and what it is in terms of the content, it's a hard hitting book, right? It's based on race and it's based on design and it's culture. So, but the people that was featured at the event, or that went to actually to the exhibition, was all walks of life. So you see people from different backgrounds, different communities engaging with the exhibition, which was incredible. And also, I'll put it out there, it was my first time I've actually seen my work on an exhibition. So it was pretty awesome to see that. And then going forward, while the exhibition was happening, I got a chance to speak at Adobe Max, about the publication, about the work that I did on it as well. So again, it's nice to sort of see how you're able to produce a piece of work and see how it can have legs and actually go in the community and keep that conversation still flowing and keep on going. Even though the book has been designed and done, it's still similar to the Brownies book as well, right? It's the idea of you do a piece like that, but then how does it then go into community and make an impactful change?
Yeah. Do you have advice for people who are starting to pursue a freelance career? I mean, you've had such incredible outlets and done such amazing work. Do you have advice from that for people who are just starting of how to get where you're at or just even find where they want to go?
Yeah, I think it's a tricky one, right? Because I was thinking about this today, actually, about this. Like at the end, when you give talks and you talk about advice that you would give, and the thing that I used to frustrate me the most, I should say, was when I first started out, or when I was at uni, I should say. When you have lecturers who come in, guest lecturers, amazing guest lecturers, and they say about, you must be brave, be bold, put yourself out there. That's not everyone's nature. Like that's not everyone. Some people are good for it and they're confident with it, but not everyone is. And the thing I would say is, for anyone watching that wants to put their artwork out there but a bit shy is the idea of collaborating with other people. Because when you're able to work in a bit of a network or at least a team of other folks, you start to utilize skills. And then, you might not have the skill of maybe at this early stage of maybe articulating a project or, being confident putting yourself out there, but someone in the team might be. And that's where you kind of balance out your skill sets. So my advice would kind of be to, if you're not already, obviously try and be bold with it. But if not, then that's okay. And actually try and work with folks who are, and then try and use that to kind of build a bit of a community, build a bit of a society, and actually create impactful work. Because the way I see it is that both yourself and whoever you work with, hopefully like-minded, want to get the best deliverable possible. And it helps when you work with people that are, in the same space as you, especially if you're like a student or graduate. I give a lot of talks at universities, and that's something I try and put out there, especially towards the end of the chat or end of the stream, end of the presentation, where I talk about, have I got a slide for it? I'm pretty sure I do. Where is it? There we go. Some slides of talks where I've given. And again, it's the idea of making it feel realistic and transparent of everything that I say. I'm all good to show the publications and the final things, but actually I'm quite keen on showing the things that went, or talking about the things that went wrong as well, and the process, because yeah, it's not how the world works where everything is all shiny. It's the reality of it. So I try and keep it as real to the point as possible, especially when you can see on the screen now, the talks that I give, it ranges in terms of age. So clearly there's obviously on the far right, you've got kids, in secondary school right up to university students. So you have to kind of tailor your talk to kind of marry up to the right audience. And I actually like when I speak to more the younger age, because they're quite savage with the approach. And I think I like the honesty of it. I don't know, as you get older, you're a bit more reserved, but yeah, there's something quite nice about the organicness that comes with, like, yeah, just wanting to know because you're curious rather than being reserved. And yeah, so it's cool.
Are there any highlight questions or comments that you've gotten from students as you've been giving these speeches?
Do you know what came to mind? It was mad. I can't remember what it was actually. It was a college, and I gave a lot. It was a pretty long chat. It was like an hour talk. I tried to break it up, so the half an hour of like like a project, like make a zine, like a quick zine, and then 30 minutes of showing work and talking. At the end of it, someone asked me about how do I apply for a mortgage or something like that, and I was like, what? What's that got to do with anything that maybe because I mentioned about at the period I was just buying a property, but I don't remember talking that much about it. And then it was just, but it was random. And I remember one of the teachers like, why did you, like, almost annoyed that the kid asked that? But I was like, you know what? If they're curious to know, let's not go too off piece, obviously. And somehow I think I was able to moonwalk it back into what we were discussing about work, because I tried that. But yeah, that was a random question, which you just never know. And I kind of like those curveball questions because it makes it fun as well, right? Like, it's just, yeah, it's all good giving these talks, but you got to have a laugh with it. Like in the bottom right hand corner, that was generally a good laugh of that day. So yeah.
That's too funny. You're like, I don't really think I have the authority to give you advice on
Yeah,
that,
exactly. Who am I to be
but yeah.
giving you more? And it's like, you're also like 14, so I don't know about that. But anyway, yeah.
That's too funny. Well, as you're giving these speeches and these talks, what are some milestones that you're sharing with these students or just people in general of like your career and just milestones that you've achieved over the years?
So I'm so sorry. Can you repeat that question,
You're
please?
totally fine. Yeah. I was gonna say, what are some milestones of your career as you look back? Like these are
Ah,
the things that I'm
mm.
so, so proud of.
The things I'm probably fast. So let me go into
I
my
know we're skipping
website.
around your presentation. I'm
Um,
sorry.
no, do you know what? I like it off piece, and I had the stuff up already. Knowing me, I would have just went
Perfect.
stayed on the PDF all day. What am I proud of? So I guess the linkage with Adobe and doing more and more hosting is mad, because I first started doing hosting during the pandemic, right? So it actually still during a still breathing project. So that was a weird period where things were kind of happening. And when I look back to this was a day where I worked with Cladding. So I was basically doing Adobe Live. I was showing, you can see there, it was a 3-day stream. So back then it was 3 days, which
Wow.
was like, whoa. So yeah, that took a lot out of me, but in a good way. It was still an amazing experience. I designed a book, Editorial magazine, based on bat biodiversity, which felt kind of relevant because it was during the COVID period. So like bats,
True.
and they were getting a bit of a bad name. So it worked out quite well. And then off the back of that, I kind of now do hosting, which is cool. So I put that in there because I guess it's nice to do something separate to just designing books. Obviously, I love designing books. I really do. But I also love talking to people in terms of designers and creatives, especially those not in the UK, right? So I would never be able to do it unless it was through an Adobe Live experience. So that's something that I'm super proud of. And then on a final note, I guess the one I can't say I'm proud of it because I haven't actually really finished it yet. And that's a bit of a cheap way of saying it. But the V&A project, because this is perhaps I guess you want to say biggest because of the name of because obviously who they are. It's a museum, right? But I think it's a project where we're in the flow of it. I can't say too much, of course, because early days, but it's a project where there's a lot of opportunity to have fun with it in terms of the design and really push the boundaries. But also, it's a project that, because I should say what it is. It's called The Music is Black, and it's 125 years of Black British music in the UK. So what makes this awesome is that I can bring my grandparents along to the exhibition who listened to music back when they were growing out from the Windrush era up until like Stormzy or Little Sims, which is like stuff for today's world. So
That's
it's
cool.
nice to kind of bridge that gap. So I feel like that's something that's going to be memorable, even though it hasn't happened just yet. But yeah, put that in
And for
there.
people outside of the outside of the UK, what is V&A?
Sorry, Victoria and Albert Museum. I'm a
Okay.
terrible person. So yeah, it's
No?
a museum institute. So yeah, definitely worth checking them out.
No, that's amazing. And you're going to get to walk through your work again, right? In another museum setting, hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah. I mean, if it's not, then yeah. But either way, it's still pretty cool to be part of it as well. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's incredible. Okay, so we do have about 5 minutes left here. So chat, if you have any burning questions for Kieron here, definitely drop those in the chat and we will get those answered for you. But Kieron, as we're closing out here,
Yeah.
what are the highlights of your PDF that you want to be showing us? So just of your career and everything.
Of course. I mean, yeah. Well, I guess the Brownies book is obviously starting to take legs now, and it's been out, and it's some of you might recognize this person. I think they're a big deal. The Vice President of the US. Yeah, we
A
all
big
know who
deal,
it is, right?
definitely.
Big deal. So she got a copy of the book recently. Again, this is Charlie, one of the authors of the publication, and he's also up
Wow.
for an award, which is pretty sweet. The NAACP. So again, it's cool to sort of, and this is all in the US, right? So, I'm in the UK and I'm finding out about this stuff through LinkedIn. It's nice to sort of see. So that's kind of where I'm at now in terms of the publications that I'm working on and the V&A. But the thing I kind of wanted to kind of end on was actually what we're at now, because obviously I'm doing freelancing, but I also had recently a newborn. So that's kind of a big change in terms of my life. And it's a project that with no end goal. It's just a project with the unknown, but it's also exciting. So this is my 7 month today, actually, 7 months today, Willow, and that's my wife as well. So yeah, it's for any new parents in there thinking like, oh my God, the idea of being a freelancer and being a parent, it is possible. But come back to me in a year and I'll tell you if it is or not. Yeah.
It's a beautiful family that you have. But what has that change
Thank
been
you.
like for you of moving, into parenthood, and how has that impacted your design work or just your freelance life in general?
Priorities, I guess you start to understand what is a priority, right? Yeah, everything is a priority when you're a freelancer, but I think there is literally, in my world now, it's like, okay, I know what I've got to do in a set period of time so that I can get home and be with my family. Or for example, weekends. Before Willa was born, maybe I'd do some work on the weekends. For me, it's family time now. So I try and be very strategic of how I plan my time and my day, and also makes me more proactive because I know in a short period of time I need to get things done. I'm very close to swearing there, but I didn't swear. But get things done. So yeah, it's a learning curve, and like I said, I'm 7 months into this new job because it's like a job. It is a job. I haven't put
Yeah.
on my LinkedIn yet, but it is a job. But yeah, I'm enjoying it with an awesome partner too. So yeah.
That's incredible. Yeah. Okay, lightning round here for you as we're coming in the last minutes. Who are some of your
Yes.
best and greatest influences? If you had to name names.
Straight away that comes to mind is an art director called Patrick Miles, because he was
Ooh.
a person who came to my uni. I gave a talk, and when I graduated, I remember we met up and I showed him some work, and it was, again, it wasn't to look for a job, it was just to kind of get his first hand experience of what you're seeing, where can I go in terms of what I'm doing, if I'm doing it right. And weird enough, I mean, that was 10 years ago and we're still good mates now. And actually, when I think back to when I first approached, being super nervous fresh out of uni, to grabbing a beer and having a chat, it's nice how things have organically grown. So, and he's a very insanely talented art director and designer, also for editorial as well. So that's also why I find that super inspiring. So yeah, shout
Wow.
out to Patrick.
A 2-in-1. Okay, last really quick question for you.
Hit
Where are
me.
you looking for inspiration and to continue learning?
Where am I looking for inspiration? Adobe Live, of course. Adobe Live. Yeah, of course. No, I've got to put it out there. No, obviously Adobe Live, because it's fresh to see people currently doing work. And also I try to do things outside of the realm of the computer screen. So try and go out to museums, galleries, exhibitions, things that's currently happening, just to keep your creative mind afloat.
Definitely. It sounds like you're going to museums on weekends. You're doing like
Try
in-person books,
to.
like bookstores and things like that, to keep you
Yeah, yeah.
inspired. That's awesome.
I'll try to,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, as we are gearing up to close out this stream, are there any final words of advice or any like last minute things that you like to give to anybody?
Um, Editorial, it is fun. It is hard work, but like any project, right? It's just you kind of see it through. And it is definitely worth when you get to see like something tangible and physical in hand. Not every project we do is tangible. Sometimes it's always online and that's it, and it goes out into the wilderness. But when it is print, obviously I'm being biased, it's nice to have something tangible. So yeah, have fun with editorial design, and obviously check out my website because I've got updates and new projects on Instagram and all that jazz as well.
Yes, awesome. Well, Kieron, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful time. It's been so insightful, and you've just shared so much. We really appreciate you being here on Adobe Live. Stick around, chat. You've been wonderful. Thanks for being here. Up next is Corey Hall, and they're going to be teaching typography. So definitely stick around for that. And make sure to tune in next week as well for the Adobe Spotlight. I'll be hosting again 12 to 2, or sorry, 12 to 1, if you are on Pacific time. And I hope to see you guys there. So thank you so much for joining. It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much. Ciao, ciao.
Bye.